inform the audience about the opportunity to use the Zoom Q&A function. If you want to pose questions along the way, you may even like questions, which will make some questions more popular and more likely to be picked. You may start post questions from the beginning, from right now, and we'll see what time allows us to address. Then I'd like to welcome panelists and audience to this seminar with the sort of short and not so tabloid title, Equitable Partnerships in International Higher Education and Research Collaboration. So my name is Nikolai Hegtun, and I will be the chair of this seminar. And for your information, this seminar will be recorded. The reason why NORHED decided to organize this seminar on this topic is that we recognize that there are challenges in ensuring fair and equitable partnerships in development collaboration programs in general. And in many collaboration programs, we observe that there is an underlying or even sometimes explicit assumption that knowledge will be transferred from the north to the south. And this implies that there's a sort of one-way knowledge sharing and that partners in the south do not have anything to teach the partners in the north. And this sort of excludes the scenario that partners in the south are able to teach the partners in the north anything, and also the possibilities of mutual learning and co-production of knowledge. So are these underlying assumptions correct? Are they real? And in that case, are we reinforcing these inequalities and even maybe colonialist thinking? This is what we're addressing in this seminar. So we will present 4 researchers who have participated in the NORHED program, the Norwegian program on higher education and research for development. And they will tell us about their experiences with South-South-North collaboration and partnerships. And after this, we will also discuss how collaboration can allow for mutual exchange of knowledge and learning. And in that section, we will be joined by representatives from the Norwegian Research Council, from NORHED, the Norwegian Agency for Exchange Cooperation, and even NORHED, the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation. First, we will show you a short film from NORHED.
Down. The model that the northern partners used to do was to solve problems coming from the north. But now the new approach is to solve a problem from the source. So you need to build the capacity at the source to solve the problem.
We need to have high-level experts, professionals who can solve problems, who can do research, who can, develop policies, and who can serve as professionals, and also teachers and instructors. They're all coming out of higher education institutions.
Utdanning et prioritert område for norsk bistand. Det inkluderer høyere utdanning. Og på den fronten så NORHED flaggskipprogrammet vårt for kapasitetsbygging innen høyere utdanning.
A preventable disease like rabies, we need to make sure that we do our best in the animal sector.
Programmet ganske stort. Det inkluderer 50 prosjekter over 26 land.
My name is Pitia David. I'm from the University of Juba in South Sudan. I'm currently enrolled in Makerere University for Masters in Data Communication and Software Engineering.
Så vi har veldig mange universiteter vi samarbeider med, og et av de Makerere Universitetet i Uganda. Der har vi ganske mange prosjekter på ulike tematiske områder. Men det som går igjen at alle prosjektene, i tillegg til å bygge opp universiteter og styrke universiteter, så skal prosjektene ha en veldig sterk samfunnsengasjement.
We all fear. Who doesn't fear? Ebola can raise up his hand. The one who doesn't fear, he can raise up his hand.
Så det er ikke nok at kunnskapen bare skal produseres innenfor akademia, den må ut til lokalbefolkningen. Høyere utdanning er ekstremt viktig for utvikling. Først og fremst fordi det produserer kvalifisert arbeidskraft innenfor egentlig alle sektorer.
And NORHED plays a big role in research and in teaching programs and even in community engagement. Students coming and exposed here to laboratories, libraries, and taking part in seminars. So it actually contributes a lot to quality of education.
All right, so we'll now enter the first part of this debate, and I will introduce our first panelists, who will get 5 minutes to present their projects and their part in the NORHED program, and then address 2 questions. The 2 questions are the following. What does a fair and equitable partnership look like? Do you have any indicators and characteristics of that? And the second question is, what is at stake when partnerships are unequal? So I will now open for the first speaker. You will have 5 minutes each, and the first speaker is Dr. Julian Sansotim from Makerere University in Uganda. Julian has been leading projects on weather forecasting and services in Uganda, in Tanzania, and South Sudan. And this is also a collaboration with the University of Bergen. So Julian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nikolai, and a big thank you to the organizers for inviting me to say something. So the project that I have been heading on weather information management in East Africa had 4 partners. Makerere University, we were the main partner. University of Bergen was our Norwegian partner. University of Juba and Dar es Salaam Institute of Technology in Tanzania were the other partners. And from my experience, a fair and equitable partnership, first of all, its beginning, the way the relationship begins. In our particular case, we had, in Makerere, we have a Bergen office. So there's a Makerere University Bergen partnership through which we got introduced to our Norwegian partner. And I strongly believe that this kind of international offices, they promote trust, mutual trust, and mutual respect among the partners. Ideally, other partnerships, before we got this, the University of Bergen contact, our research group had tried to reach out to professors in University of Bergen whose work looked similar to what we were wanting to do. And we got a lukewarm response. But when the international offices on both sides got involved, we actually got a very good and cooperative partner and very enthusiastic from the north. So the way the partnership starts is very, very important as it has ability to promote trust and respect among the partners. And the other experience we had was that in designing the project and in implementing the project, we had partners, the implementing partner was given the freedom to contextualize the activities that they would participate in, and also given the budget to support those activities. So that's very important in terms of facilitating the collaboration among partners. And also we had mutual contribution to the work packages that we defined. So once we defined that this is what we wanted to achieve, that all the work packages, let's say not all the partners would be interested. So the partner that would be interested, the 2 or 3 partners that would be interested would decide on who will lead the package and what will the other participants in that package contribute. And then from there, we're able to break it down to the smaller work tasks of the different students, PhD students and master's students. But initially having clearly defined a leadership structure within the project in terms of which partner is the leader and also the other participants, what will their contribution be. We found this very empowering because then we'd have only those that are interested in a task participate in it, and would also be able to hold each other accountable in terms of what we promise to deliver, and would also be able to clearly define it down to the students that are part of it and hold them accountable too. So we believe that contributed a big deal to the results we were able to achieve. And of course, also that came in with the fact that we'll be able to define who are the, in terms of joint supervision of the students, who are the partners that will support that student. So I think those are some of the, and finally, regular participation in progress meetings by all partners. That's very important, because after you have decided what you want to do, keeping track of the progress is very important. So in our case, we managed to define monthly progress meetings, and all the partners were participating in them. And then coming to the second question about what is at stake when the partnership is unequal. The first thing that we believe is at stake is that some of the partners will be reluctant to participate in some of the project activities. Once a partner doesn't have a clear role, then much as you might say we are doing these tasks, that they don't feel that they are part of the we. So once they have a clear part in the task, then that is very empowering on their part to do it. But if they don't, then they'll be reluctant to undertake some of the activities. And obviously that will lead to some of the results not being achieved. And on the other hand, the partner who is the leader, or who are the leader of the task, would also get fatigued, because they'll be driving to achieve this result, but without a lot of support from the others. So, and that would imply that they also fail to undertake some of the additional tasks that would be important to achieve, as they are stretched out thin. And in general, we believe that there'll be less learning among the partners. They'll not be able to learn much about each other's strengths or each other's contribution. And the project activities or the project results that are promised by that partnership will be at stake of failing to be reached because of these imbalances. Yeah, and I would like to end with a quotation I like very much from Henry Ford. It says, "Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success." So we are grateful to NORHED for giving us that opportunity to work together and learn from our partners, both within the South, but also with our Norwegian partner. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. I will now introduce the second panelist, Roy Krøvel. He's a professor in journalism at the Oslo Metropolitan University. For many years, he's been coordinating networks of indigenous intercultural community universities in Latin America, with funding partly through NORHED. So, Roy, the two questions also goes out to you, please. You're on mute, Roy. If you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Nikolai. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, and thank you for organizing this and inviting me. Let me first say that my background is journalism. I work at the Sami University College for Applied Sciences also, and much of my time I have spent with the network of indigenous intercultural and community universities in Latin America. Ayala, that is the way indigenous movements like to call Latin America. And what I will say today has been strongly influenced by this network, and to some degree also by my experiences at the Sami University College in the north of Norway. So first of all, the first question, what does a fair and equitable partnership look like? Well, Nikolai, the short answer is that we do not know. And I think we do not know because we have not seen it yet. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure that we will ever see it, or at least not in my time. Still, it is important to think about it, or at least to imagine what it could look like, because failure to somehow establish equitable partnership undermines the possibility the projects will have to reach the goals in many ways. You asked us also to mention or come up with some indicators, something that could indicate what it is, equitable partnership. Now, for me, I only managed to come up with 2 indicators. One is reporting, who reports to whom, and who is holding who accountable. Is the flow of accountability flowing upwards, or is it downwards? Unfortunately, currently, in all cases I know, in reality, the flow of accountability is upwards and out of the local context, where the partnerships are supposed to work with some local beneficiaries. And the second indicator is, where are the key decisions taken? And of course, the key decisions, the frameworks where we have to operate within, are taken in the global north. And it's difficult to imagine equitable partnerships within this framework. Still, I think it is possible at least to try to establish a culture of equality. And that is leading to the next question you asked us to reflect on: what is at stake when partnerships are unequal? And I think any academic would say that science, first of all, science and research depend on free exchange of ideas and knowledge. And free exchange of ideas and knowledge cannot coexist well with dependency. Dependency will only destroy the free exchange of ideas. Secondly, I think that we must realize that for instance, although I've been working in Nicaragua for 20 years, I've had more than 50 master students in Nicaragua. I'm not an expert on Nicaragua. I do not know the local context well enough to understand the finer details which are necessary to understand, to evaluate if the project I'm involved in is doing well or not as good as it should be doing. In my local hometown in Norway, yes, I know of all the social networks, I know about the cultures, I know who are friends with whom, and I am in a position, authority, that something is not going according to plans. But in Nicaragua, after 20 years, I depend on locals, people from the communities, to tell me. And if there's no equality, that will not happen, simply. In my view, we should all read Koch and Weingard's book on the illusion of knowledge transfer. And they have an expression which is called critical mass of local experts. And hopefully that is what we need to strive for, building up or joining forces to build up critical mass of local experts, so that we can at least have some local knowledge produced in the local context that can stand up and challenge what is coming from the north. I think that was my 5 minutes, Nikolai. I actually plan to say a lot more, but hopefully we'll have a discussion afterwards.
Yes, we will have, and you will get a couple of minutes more then. Next up, we have Professor Munzul Asal. Professor Asal, he has a PhD from Bergen University. He's a professor of social anthropology at the University of Khartoum. And he is a project leader for a NORHED program called Refugees on the Move, South Sudanese refugees in Ethiopia, Sudan, and Uganda. In his former engagement with NORHED, he has been focusing on border issues and marginalized peoples in border areas and how they affect the lives of people living in those areas. So the Zoom microphone is now yours, Asal, please.
Thank you very much, Nikolai. I'm glad for this opportunity, and thank you for the organizers, Janet and Greta. Yes, as you just said, I was project leader for a NORHED 1 project on borderland dynamics in East Africa. And this is a network of anthropology departments in the Bergen, Khartoum, Makerere, and Addis Ababa. And the focus was on the issues related to migration and other border land processes in these 4 countries. The project provided support for MA students. We had 28 MA students. We also had 9 PhDs, and 2 postdocs, in addition to a number of other activities, including 3 major conferences, plus additional training workshop for our students and postdocs. The project ran for 5 years, and we had an extension, and we are lucky to continue our effort in building network and partnership into the second phase of NORHED 2, with the project that you just mentioned. I'm lucky to still continue leading the new project. To us, equitable partnership simply means that there shouldn't be any imposition of priority issues, independence in choosing activities for the partners, and also it means simply reciprocal trust and respect. And here, when we talk about partners, I think we should be aware about the different levels of partnership. Now, in the NORHED 1 model, there are a number of partnerships. There is a partnership between the North and the South, between the Norwegian institutions and the institution in the South, and also there is partnership within the South itself. So we need to make this differentiation, because any one of these levels has different implications when it comes to partnership. Partnership also, to us, when it is equitable, it means that there is mutual respect, mutual support. And it does also mean that networking and partnership should be entrenched within the South itself, because traditionally the thinking is simply focused on the South-North sort of partnership and networking. So in our case, we entered into a new and lacking aspect, which is getting together and putting our act together in the South before even thinking about having it with the North. And in our case, we proudly feel that that was actually what we achieved. What would be at stake if partnership is unequal? I think a lot is actually going to be at stake, because there will be frustration, there will be a loss of inertia, there will be loss of inspiration. And of course, the logical conclusion of all this is that the whole idea of building a semblance of partnership or network will collapse at the end of the day. There's no question about that. And just let me go back and turn and say that the partnerships that we have had in NORHED 1 needs to be looked at in a historical context. We are talking about contacts and links that started in 1993, when someone like renowned like the late Professor Frederick Bass came and taught in Sudan, followed by a number of other Norwegian scholars like Gunnar Holland, Gunnar Solbo, and Leif Mangar, who continued all this. So they were already building blocks that we need to look at before thinking about what we are currently engaged in. Another critical point for me to mention is also the human factor in all this. I think, well, of course, we all have to deal with bureaucracy, we have to deal with rules, we have to deal with regulations, we have to deal with a lot of bureaucratic stuff. But I think the human dimension is quite critical, because one partnership can succeed while another one can fail. And here the human condition is quite important, quite relevant. We are very lucky to have people who have been collaborating for a long time. They know each other, they understand each other, and then we built on that. And that was one of the reasons why I look with pride for what we achieved in NORHED 1, and I'm looking forward to more achievement in the NORHED 2. I think I will stop there.
Thank you, Professor Azal. Last but not least, certainly not least, we have Professor Anne Hellum. She's a professor at the Department of Public and International Law at the University of Oslo, and her work is particularly focused around women's human rights and legal pluralism in African contexts. So you've been working in Zimbabwe, in Malawi, in Zambia, in Kenya, and Norway. So please, Professor, the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me to share some experiences from the NORHED 1 program that I was involved in. And the aim of this research and teaching program, which was conducted by the University of Zimbabwe, the Faculty of Law in Nairobi, Chancellor College Malawi, and University of Zambia, was to change the way law is taught in the law schools in the participating countries. As you all probably know, law is still taught very much in the same way as it was taught in the colonial era. Very formalistic and uncontextual. And very unreflected patriarchal values underlying. And so what the partners were very interested in doing now, they had already started courses, separate courses, elective courses in women's law, in equality law, or gender and the law. But these courses, of course, were separate. And so it was students who were specially interested who took them. So they didn't really penetrate, law, the way law is taught as such. And so with NORHED 2, they saw the opportunity to start out a much more systematic program of education law reform in the university, which was very much needed. And one reason why this was chosen at this point in time was that new constitutions had come about, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Malawi, with the equality principle being constitutionalized. And this had great implications for how law is interpreted and applied. In the same time, university policies in Southern and Eastern Africa changed. They were now expected to integrate gender perspective in all teaching and research. And so, of course, my partners who had been in the business for a while saw this is a really space opening to undertake reform. And so that was a very important reason why we embarked on this gender mainstreaming approach to law and legal education. The University of Oslo was also inspired it because we had started with such a program in 2003 and had made very slow progress, but we were asked to participate with our experiences. So our ambitious goal really now was to initiate reform in legal education, which involved that all law students in the participating universities would learn how to apply the gender equality principle, for example, in criminal law, in family law, in property law, because lawyers are very important in terms of governance, distribution of livelihood resources, management of livelihood resources, land, water, and so on. So they play and can play a much more central role, a more important role in the day-to-day work as lawyers and as in governance. And so it was, I think I should start to say that this project was quite successful. all the universities succeeded in their curriculum law reform, which is a very, very big undertaking. We were surprised ourselves. And I think there's 3 reasons why it was successful. And that was partly how the project was initiated. I think the dialogue, the discussion, and the problems, the plans were initiated by the partners in the South. Oslo was asked to respond. And that's very important for ownership and commitment to undertake such a mammoth task, which is met with resistance. Then secondly, I think the project was location. It was decided to locate it in the South. That meant that most of the planning meetings, the research workshops, the staff development events all took place in southern institutions. And that made it possible for a lot of staff members from the 3 or 4 faculties to come together so everyone could participate and be part of it. And that was very important because it was very important to recruit staff members who were not working in these fields in order to transfer knowledge within the faculties and between the faculties. And so Oslo's role, what we were asked to do, was to come down and share our experiences, on how to go about, what our experiences were, and how we were using the equality and anti-discrimination principle and what it meant in this context. And then, of course, scholars and my colleagues, we had to situate ourselves in the South and engage in dialogue and discussion, when we were bringing knowledge we had to the table. So that in and of itself, I think, influenced the way in which we contributed. And then the third factor, which I thought was important for success, that was that the project was led formally and really from the South. It was the Southern and Eastern African Center in Women's Law at University of Zimbabwe who had the leadership and who were reporting. And that also it was a lot of work, but it was also very important in terms of ownership and control and dialogue between the partners in the South, and also the legitimacy of the project. It was not seen as a kind of Western innovation, but it was a real regional undertaking. And so I think rather than talking about what is at stake, I think these 3 factors are very important simply for success, because it takes ownership, commitment, to carry out such projects. If you don't have that, then you will get the money and do the things and report what you have to do, but don't worry so much about success and making a real impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. We'll now enter into a session where the panelists can comment on each other, and I'll also ask some direct questions to the panelists, because now we've heard from different projects with different experiences. But maybe I can start with you, Julianne, because you started as well. If I can ask you how your project came into being, and if you can elaborate who initiated the project, and how did you go about in identifying partners, potential partners, and what were you looking for when you were searching for partners outside the sort of academic sphere as well, and why?
Okay, so our project came into being by before the NORHED call came out. 2 of us in the South, Makerere University and Dar es Salaam Institute of Technology, had begun working on a certain project. Personally, what caused me to think about this particular project, because when I saw the NORHED call, I wrote out to the Tanzanian colleagues and said, I've seen this. Are you interested in looking at weather information management? what caused me to think about weather information management was drawing the comparisons between my experience as a student in Europe, a PhD student, and now back home, and seeing the lack of weather information among the people and the impact it was giving. I had been a student in the Netherlands, and all the time we had access to weather information on a daily basis. And back home in Uganda, this wasn't the case. And around the time, my mother had done a farming project, and it didn't work out well. She lost a lot of her crop, and because of, she assumed the patterns and everything. So in pondering about this, I was like, Ugandans need access to this information, and it's not there. So when I saw the call for NORHED then from NORHED 1, I thought we have an opportunity to develop something here to get this information to the people on the grassroots. And when I reached out, when we were told we needed to, in the call, it was clear we needed a Norwegian partner. And like I mentioned, when I first made my 5 minutes, we tried to write to some of the people at University of Bergen, and we didn't get a very good response. It wasn't very positive, but then we went through the Bergen office here at Makerere University, and were able to be introduced to some partners and eventually who were also enthusiastic, and we managed to write this together. The Norwegian partner, on the other hand, had experience with the University of Juba, and they also brought them on board. So that is how our collaboration came together.
We've actually had a question on the Q&A function here, and I would like to ask you, since you mentioned that the troubles of getting in touch and getting contact, would it be an idea to have a sort of an office? The question is, should, for example, Makerere University have an office at the University of Bergen in order to enhance equity in those partnerships? For example, would that be an idea, do you think?
For sure, it makes a big difference. Having a contact place with which to get in touch with researchers in another area, it makes a difference. So I think it would be a positive contribution. Whether it can be afforded or not, that's the part that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. Roy, you mentioned that you have more to say, and now's the chance. It was interesting that you said that we cannot see perhaps truly equitable partnerships in our time, and we've recently had this decolonization debate in academic circles, and given the topics of today, do you think is it something with the sort of how can we solve this within the principal agent framework that we do have and that we do confront every day within international aid? Will there ever be solved, these power relations, do you think? And how would they be solved if you say, maybe not in our time, but in the future?
That's a good question. What I actually was thinking about was the 1970s, when the United Nations, for example, had like a program where quite a lot of politicians and academics discussed new economic orders, how to reorganize things on a much grander scale. And well, since then, all of these debates seem to have died out. They are not around anymore. So as I see it, we, for now at least, have to sort of exist within the framework we have and be content with having small steps forward. And one of the issues that I'm particularly concerned with, which I think we have to consider really closely, is what we are doing locally. What type of universities are popping up with Norwegian money, and what are their relationships to the local context? We know from before that universities can be quite hierarchical places, authoritarian places, and that knowledge can be used not necessarily only to good things. I think that's not a secret. For instance, knowledge and universities and education has been used in Norway against, I would say, the Sami people for centuries. So we have to reflect how does the ways we are doing this affect locally, universities and power relations. That is one of my main concerns. And I'm concerned about accountability, not going downward to the grassroots, but upwards to us. And then somehow politicians here are accountable to Norwegians that do not know much about the local context where projects are placed. So that's one of my concerns. And that's actually why I'm not that optimistic. It seems like I'm the pessimist here, Nikolai.
Well, if times where if there were opportunities in the 70s, it might come back. You know, you should keep your eye on that policy window when that comes. I would like to ask also Professor Asal a question. You mentioned bureaucratic stuff. How do you know, if you see it as, I don't know how you see the NORHED requirements, if those are strict or not, but maybe you see them as strict. You're allowed to say that if you do. How does that impinge on your projects? You know, when you work with partners with sort of weak or insufficient systems in place for reporting and financial management, etc., how do you reconcile that work with the requirements that you have to comply with from NORHED?
Thank you for asking this question. It's quite important and interesting. To be very honest with you, I haven't felt at all that the NORHED requirements when it comes to reporting are difficult or stringent. On the contrary, these are quite straightforward, they are transparent. And by the way, even before signing the contracts, we went through a lot of negotiations and discussions with NORHED, so that everybody understands what is there in those forms and requirements. So by the time that we start the project implementation, we already had an idea about what is needed from us and what we should do in terms of providing financial reports and narrative reports. But of course, there are always weak links, you know, everywhere. And one of the challenges that we had to deal with was the fact that not all partners are equal when it comes to their ability of dealing with these matters, especially the financial reporting bit of it. So this sometimes causes delays, but then somehow we manage to overcome. If, for instance, you have 4 partners, 3 of them are doing quite well, 1 is a bit lagging, you know, you can manage. So there are challenges, there are hiccups, but all in all, I think I don't see the requirements as you know, out of the way or quite difficult to deal with. Of course they are. And I must also say that when it comes to the financial reporting, there are, of course, international standards. You know, when it comes to, for instance, auditing, there are international standards that are everywhere. In Khartoum, in Makerere, in Addis Ababa, in Bergen. Those are applied. So I think on this front, I don't see problems. Of course, there are challenges, as I said, among partners, but otherwise, I don't look at them as quite complicated or difficult.
So you don't see those requirements or as in any way influencing the sort of the notion of equitable partnerships in a way? Does that affect that?
Except for the fact that, for instance, I was a project leader. I was a person in charge of all these things. I approve the budget and the request for even the northern partner, for the Norwegian partner. I signed to NORHED that please give him or give them money. But then the rule is that the Norwegian partner is not subject to, of course, it is subject to the Norwegian auditing system, as much as we are also subjected to our national audit system. So the partner in Khartoum is audited by the auditor of the Sudan. The Makerere does it in a different way. But at the end of the day, there is an audit that's done. So my overall position is actually positive on this.
That's interesting. Anna, I would like to ask you as well. In your experience, you talked about universities in Norway being inspired from what happened in African contexts, and so who learns from who in your perspective and with your experiences? As I mentioned, the common sort of perception may still be that the transfer of knowledge streams sort of from the north into the south, but how do you see it?
Well, good question. Important to reflect on this. I see it as a process of mutual learning and a constant two-way flow of knowledge. I think this whole project of changing legal education in the universities in the south, that was the aim, the formal aim of the project. But of course, Oslo being part of it and being part of a dialogue also was to the effect that this made a lot of interesting inputs to our own gender mainstreaming model, that didn't work very well. And I think in a way, being part of this long-term cooperation, which was a very systematic effort and where very systematic approaches was taken by the universities in the south, because they had funding to do it and had resources actually to do it much more thorough than we had. That being part of that process in a way breathed new life into this slow process at our own faculty. And so as most of the events took place in the south, we also had the opportunity to have international seminar on legal education and gender mainstreaming at our own faculty, where partners from the south actually contributed and where faculty leadership was present. And of course, in this seminar, our faculty was faced with the fact that the partners in the south were totally way miles ahead. They had introduced obligatory courses on equality law. They had integrated gender perspective in property law, in environmental law, in constitutional law, things we were still struggling with, and was met with, what shall I say, passive resistance at our own faculty. So this was a real wake-up call for the faculty, that this actually is a kind of international requirement, that is taking place in a lot of universities of the world, that we were ahead, but we're falling behind. And I think that really, really was helpful, along with other factors, to make progress at our own faculty. So that was one thing. The learning very concrete learning outcome. And the other one was the joint research that was being done in connection with joint authorships on how human rights and gender equality is implemented and taken down on the ground in areas like land and water in Southern and Eastern Africa. That kind of joint research is very important for us to use in our own courses. I teach a course of women's law and human rights, where joint research from this project is used is part of their curriculum. And here they can see very concretely, what does it take to situate these abstract principles of equality and social and economic rights in these different contexts? What does it require? And so that in that way, being part of this has been very important to build our own courses and make them much more relevant for international students. I now have students from all over the world, and they want answer to the problems and issues they see in other places. And I think also in terms of decolonization and decolonization of law, I think joint research with researchers in the South, for example, seeing how water management and land management institutions very much still is shaped by colonial legislation, which actually bar women's and indigenous people's participation and equal distribution. It makes it possible for us to teach, in an integrated way, what decolonization of law means and why it is necessary, and how colonial law still, to a very large extent, is at place in these countries, and how we need to be aware of this. Our students who are going to work internationally need to be aware of this. So I think we have been strengthened a lot, through this joint teaching and research to strengthen and make our own legal education more relevant globally and contextually.
Can I ask a general question to all of you? Given that a lot of these institutions and universities in the South share a lot of common experiences and challenges, it seems much more natural for them to collaborate. Why do you need? Why is the North, the universities in what do they contribute with the universities in the North? Given that what we hear now, that universities in the North can learn and just as much from the South as well. Shouldn't we just aim for South-South, more South-South collaboration? Julianne, you can respond to that first.
Based on our experience, I would say that the North is usually more technologically advanced. So while while undertaking the studies, our research studies, they were able to bring to introduce our researchers, our PhD students, to some of those technologies with which to, for example, forecast the weather and things like that. So we're able to simplify the tasks and maybe even make it more accurate based on the technologies they had more access to. So in that case, if it was a South-South, then we would have missed out on that. So I would say there is a unique contribution by the Northern universities with that example in mind.
Roy, do you have any comments on that?
Well, for me, it's quite obvious. My daily work is to educate journalists, and journalists are supposed to report on global issues to a Norwegian audience in Norwegian, and we need Norwegian journalists doing that, actually. But we also need them to be educated about the world. So NORHED is one of the few mechanisms that we can use, first as educators and teachers, to learn more about the world. And secondly, it's a network we can also draw on when we are educating the students. The students can go on field works, or we can invite scholars from the Global South to teach. And nowadays, using Zoom, like today, it's actually no problem having lectures from Nicaragua or Ecuador when we have courses in global journalism, for instance. So it's quite obvious that we do benefit a lot from NORHED.
All right, thank you. We're now making a shift because time is moving on, and we're now going to introduce another set of panelists. We've now heard from the projects, and now we're moving to those responsible for sort of setting the conditions for partnerships.
Yes. 1 minute.
Sorry, yeah.
Just a very quick.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry
very
for that.
Very quick comments.
Yeah. I think when it comes to this North-South thing, we need to put this into historical perspective. Okay. And in our case, we were here simply because in the 60s and 70s, there were some curious Norwegian students who ended up in Sudan doing fieldwork, and then they continued the process until now. So one of the weak links that I see in the NORHED and in the current collaborative projects is the absence of students from the North who should be part of this. I would have loved to see Norwegian students as part of the capacity building in the NORHED 1 and NORHED 2. So maybe that is one of the issues we need to think about.
That's a great idea, and of course very important. And you will be able to also comment more in the last section, just so you know. But now we're making a shift, and we're going to hear from, as I said, the ones responsible for sort of setting the conditions for these partnerships, and help us promote equitable partnerships. So in this part, we'll hear from NOREC and also from NORHED and the Norwegian Research Council. And we'll start with the Norwegian Research Council, Bjørn Tore Kjellemo. He's the director of the Department for Global Development and International Relations at the Norwegian Research Council. And his department finances research on development issues where Norwegians are collaborating with international researchers, including in a lot of so-called developing countries. And so I would maybe like you just to hear from you, Bjørn Tore. Maybe you can start on commenting on what you've heard and perhaps say something about how the Norwegian Research Council work to promote equity in your partnerships and in the portfolio in general.
Thank you, Nikolai, and thank you for that. And listening to the others, which are, I think, great presentations, I think asymmetrical power relations or asymmetrical relationships will continue to exist, I think, both within the academic world and outside. And it's not just about north-south relations. Of course, there are other different asymmetrical relations because one has the upper hand in terms of funding or otherwise. So I don't think we're going to move into a situation where these asymmetrical relationships doesn't exist. What is important is the awareness we have around them and how we deal with them. And my overall impression is that the Norwegian academic institution have been aware of these relations and the need to have equitable partnerships. And I think also the examples that we heard here are good examples that there are awareness among Norwegian researchers on this relationship. And of course, for a number of years, the Norwegian Research Council have had relevant provisions in their contracts and things concerning this. But I should also say that during the last years, there has been a growing attention also both in the Research Council and I think also in Research Council in other parts of the world on the issue of equitable partnerships. So the Norwegian Research Council has, together with colleagues both in the Global South and in other European countries, now initiated and joined a project to explore this more in detail. And we're working with UK Research and Innovation, with the Swiss Research Council, with the African Academy of Sciences, with partners from the World Bank, Brazil, in order to find the good examples, the good questions, and hopefully this will also then result in a report and some guidelines and principles that can develop the practical side of this, and also hopefully make us more able to help researchers and institutions in both setting the expectations and also helping them in the practical questions. Some of you might be aware that today there's a deadline for applications to the Research Council. Hopefully many of you already have submitted your applications, but those of you that has applied for our new global health funding scheme will also see that this time we have made specific provisions on equitable partnerships. So we have tried to be very clear that all applications need to address the questions of equitable partnerships in terms of fair and equitable equitable sharing of funds, in plans for equitable sharing of credits, scientific analysis, authorships, intellectual property, and things like that, to include concrete plans on how the project will contribute to strengthening both individual and institutional capacity in collaborating institutions in low-income countries, and also to demonstrate the co-leadership on the proposed scientific agenda. So we try then to be more clear on our expectations on how Norwegian partners deal with this. And then I should state maybe also that of course equitable partnerships is not only about partnerships between researchers in concrete projects. It's partnerships between institutions, it's partnerships between funders as ourselves, and I think that during the recent years we have tried also to strengthen our dialogue with research funders in the Global South to better understand the conditions, better co-create also research agendas with them. And this is one of the things that we did also in our new global health initiative, consult with the Global South partners to hear their perspectives of the important research questions and the thematic priorities. So there's a lot of things that we have done, I think, more and more in this area during the recent years, but I also see that there is a lot of things that we can do better and that we will aim to do better in the coming years in this field. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll next up hear from Solbjørg Sjøveian from NORHED. She's the assistant director of the section for research innovation and higher education, NORHED. Her section manages the NORHED program, as well as other programs that aim to strengthen research capacity and competence in the South. I can challenge all of you panelists to look at the Q&A section because there's interesting comments there. But you will first be allowed to sort of comment on what you've heard now. And I'm also interested because, and this is a comment also from Q&A function, when NORHED designs programs such as NORHED, how do you work to ensure equality? And more specifically in the previous, this has come up in the previous phase of NORHED, the structure was such that the South-based partner was sort of the lead partner, and this seemed to have changed now. And putting the idea was sort of to put the partner in the South in the sort of driving seat, but this is changed now, and if you can care to comment on that as well as along with your other comments, that would be great. So the microphone is yours.
Thank you. I will try. Can you hear me well? Okay, good. Okay, thank you so much. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you to the different panelists before me for all the different perspectives that you have shared. I have learned quite a lot, and there's a lot to digest and reflect on from what you have already said. And I think that what you have already shared and contributed, I think in a way it stands for itself, and it's really not enough time for, and I think even my comments will be too shallow. So I think that it's good that what you have already said just sort of, it stands for itself. But of course that we have come away. I think that looking back several decades of university collaboration, I am quite sure that we have come away when it comes to equitable partnerships. But I think also from what we have heard and from what we already know, we still have a way to go. So and to your first question, Nikolai, I think that when it comes to how we have tried to design the NORHED program in order to incorporate mechanism then to facilitate for equitable partnership, first I want to say that yes, we have designed it, but I also want to say that it is built on experiences that we have it's built on experiences from NORHED 1, but it's also built on experiences from prior to NORHED 1, and it's also based on inputs from all partners in Norway and partners in the Global South. So although we did design it, it's based on input from all partners. But of course, we discussed this. What type of mechanism can we, build in order to achieve equitable partnerships? We do discuss this quite a bit, and we have tried to embody it in our program document. Of course, one mechanism that we have introduced is what we call that the projects have a bottom-up approach or researcher-driven approach, as opposed to the institutions themselves defining the projects. And this is a design that we did adopt already back in NORHED 1, the first phase. And basically, it means that the researcher should find each other, mainly through a common research interest, because we do believe that this stimulates to long-term lasting mutual academic collaboration, and possibly also more sustainable and more balanced partnership. Another feature of the NORHED program is also what we have already heard, the strong emphasis on South-South collaboration within the project, in addition to that the Norwegian partner is also a partner in the project. And the vast majority of the projects have more than one partner from the Global South. So the scale is therefore sort of heavier on the global side, Global South side in our projects. And I think facilitating for South-South collaboration serves many purposes. It might balance the partnerships, as I said, but it also enables partnerships comprising of older and more established higher education institutions together with younger institutions. It's also about risk sharing. And we also believe that it's also about long-lasting partnerships and networking beyond the period of the projects. So the NORHED program do recognize that capacity development and knowledge sharing takes place north-south, south-south, and north-south, south-south, and south-north, as we already heard. So when it comes to, with regards to who learned from who, we do talk about in the NORHED program knowledge sharing and exchange rather than the pure transfer of knowledge from Norway to the South. And we do experience that it's not only the Norwegian partner that have knowledge worth sharing. And of course, in the NORHED program, we have also heard that the knowledge is shared South-South and South-North. We heard the example from Anne previously. That's a very good example of that. So we believe that that type of sharing knowledge is strengthening equitable partnerships. But it's also important to look at how the contextual competency and the importance of critically discuss the adaptability or the transferability of knowledge produced or technical solutions developed to different contexts. So we believe that, for example, the Norwegian partners have a clear advantage and a clear role to play in the projects. However, this contextual knowledge and understanding, of course, can only be of use or actually is depending on the willingness to listen and to learn at the level of the Norwegian partner. Now, in those cases where this works well, we actually can talk about co-production of knowledge, which means that new knowledge is actually produced as an outcome of North-South, but also South-South partnerships. And I think just to also say a little bit about the experience that we have in NORHED 1, we do have experience with the many different constellations of partnership in many different contexts. Of course, several partnerships do work and function quite well and have few issues. But of course, we do have seen examples where there are challenges of unequal power relations. But I think we have to also acknowledge that this picture is kind of complex because, of course, unequal power relations can be between North and South institutions, but also between South-South institutions as well as internally in institutions. So including examples where there are historical or political reasons why good or healthy or equitable South-South partnerships may be hard to achieve. So in these examples, we have also learned in NORHED that the North partner is of particular importance. We have received feedback that in some of these cases, it's been particularly important that the North partner had played a coordinating or active role, and that the North partner have had a neutralizing or mediator role when this have happened or occurred. And we have actually also experienced that some of the partners have also sometimes called on NORHED to take a mediator role. So I think these power relations can go many ways. You did, we also, I'm going to answer your last question. I just also want to say that within the requirements, of course, in the applications and so on, we have tried to also design requirements that sort of will sort of strengthen that there will be equitable partnerships. I can't go into details because I see that my time is running up, and I want to touch on a little bit on your last questions, Nikolai, which is about why we chose to change the, you said the lead, but I think that, and you used the word lead partner, that we changed it, but I assume you mean the agreement partner, because I don't necessarily agree that that means that that's the lead partner. But I want to comment on that a little bit, since you asked that question directly. So I just want to say that the reason for shifting the agreement partner to the Norwegian institutions have been more of a practical arrangement, because management of projects designed with many partners, South-South-North partnerships, it's quite complicated and very resource intensive. The agreement partners of course, in NORHED 1 was, for the most part, the partners in the South. Yet our experience is that many of the partners were not really ready to take on this task. Although some partners did really well, the learning curve were quite steep for many of the partners. So, of course, the design of this partnership model with many different partners in the project required a lot of coordination, and of course, as well as extended responsibility, including financial responsibility for the activities at all the partner institutions, including how the other partners manage their finances. That meant for the agreement partner to consolidate all the reporting. It meant quality assuring local audits at all institutions. It meant being responsible if financial mismanagement occurred at other partner institutions and so on. And that's quite, it was a quite big role to have for the agreement partner. And it also made it quite difficult for NORHED to manage, and quite resource intensive for NORHED to follow up all the agreement partners and the projects. And our role was sometimes quite mixed. We were supposed to quality assure and approve according to the agreement. However, sometimes we were also advisors to the same projects, and we were supposed to quality assure. So this mixing of role was really not very appropriate. Just want to also say that we also noticed that the administrative burden for the agreement partner was not always positive for the partner nor the projects, because lots of time was spent by the South partners to manage the agreement at the expense of maybe working more academically. And some even Norwegian partners did report the same, that whereas before discussions in projects were between the partners were more academic, now the discussions were shifted more to more time spent on discussing budgets and administrative routines and so on. So it's more or less a practical thing, but of course, as I said before, how we do define partnerships in the NORHED program, we hope that this shift is more of a practical approach, and that there could be different lead packages within a project, meaning that certain partners take the lead in certain aspects of the project, and we do believe that will sort of balance out some of these yeah, some of these issues basically. So I can say more, but I see that my time is running up, so I think I just have to stop here.
Thank you. It would be interesting to hear the thoughts of the other panelists as well on this, and it's you know, it's more of I can understand the reason behind it. The question whether it sends a signal or something, and I might be sending a signal by giving you that much time to speak now as well. But we'll move on now quickly to NORHED, to Jan Olav Barøy. He's the Director General of NORHED. That's the Norwegian Agency for Exchange Cooperation, and he has also been the head of international programs in the Norwegian Church Aid. So Jan Olav, I would like to hear your thoughts on, you can comment of course on what you've heard now, but also if you do have some kind of a different approach to these, to how to build partnerships outside of this sort of strictly speaking academic circles. So please.
Thank you very much, Nikolai. First, I would like to pay attention to one of the panelists, and not the panelists, one of the participants actually, who has phrased an interesting question. Ole Jørgen Nydal says, good results from partnerships are more important than equity aspects. A provocating question, of course, in this panel, but Ole Jørgen, results are important. But our research on the project we have been facilitating shows that equity, mutuality, reciprocal respect actually enhances the results. So the more you level out the playground, the better the results are. Good question, but equity first, then the results will come. Nikolai, to your question, NORHED is a relatively small state entity under the Minister of Foreign Affairs, which through the past 20 years has facilitated the exchange of personnel between institutions in the south and in the north, and between institutions, organizations in the southern hemisphere. And it's actually the Norwegian Parliament who said in 2001 that you ought to have a reciprocal exchange. Those days with one-way out sending are long gone. So you ought to have a reciprocal exchange. So when organizations are applying NORHED for funds, they have already established a partnership where they have singled out the aim for their own organization, what they would like to achieve, but also they have common aims for the partnership as such. And what we experience is that the more they are talking around what they would like to do together, the higher level of equity, of respect is shown. To Julianne and Monsul, you both had very good presentations, and the way, Julianne, you approached that the Norwegian institution had a lukewarm reception of the interest. I think we should never underestimate the power of the individuals, the drivers who really are determined to run international projects, global partnerships. And Monsul, you said something along these lines, that equity partnership shows respect, and that when the partners are coming together and are listening to each other and are really paying attention to what is your challenge and how can I contribute to them, then you are playing on the same levels. And then to my two Norwegian panelists, Anne and Roy, what I listened from your presentation is one, well, there's lots of things, but if I can make it short, power and knowledge is everywhere. We as institutions in the global world have to acknowledge that knowledge and competences is everywhere. It's a matter of being smart enough to take with us what others have done before us. The examples, Anna, you have from gender mainstreaming in the law in universities in the south, which has been lagging in Norway. It's a very good one, that there are so many areas where others are far more advanced than we are. When NORHED, we run every second year QuestBack with the participants and the partner in our projects. And by the way, there's about, besides now due to COVID-19, there are normally 650 people at any point in time who have changed their workplace a year. And since 2001, we have approximately 400 partnerships. So we have quite a huge database with information when we are monitoring the progress and the results. And what is interesting is that the more you are working together and you are actually inviting someone to stay with you for a year, the higher the sending organization are reporting that they are benefiting from the exchange. No matter you are an institution in Norway or one in, let's say, in Zimbabwe, when we ask, who do you learn most from? Was that when someone from Norway came, or when your fellow from Zimbabwe came to Norway and traveled back? Everyone said it was nice with a visitor, but we really grew as an institution when we had our own people coming back and were able to utilize the skills they learned abroad. So I think in short, my recommendations to everyone is think smart and never underestimate that we can always learn from each other, and there's so much knowledge in the world. Nikolai, that was not very bureaucratic, but that's why I'm the director also.
Thank you, Jan Olav. Okay, so we have 10 minutes left, and we're entering a final session here where all panelists can commentate on each other and share thoughts. And we'll also try to pick up some of the questions from the Q&A function. Very good that you did that, Jan Olav. And that's a challenge for all panelists. But I had one question that I would like to ask to all of you, because NORHED can build everything they want, in terms of equitable partnerships, standards and norms and requirements of equality, etc., into program documents. But isn't this to some degree down to individuals, as Jan Olav was also talking about? Professor Asal, you also emphasized the importance of individuals coming down, etc. How important are individuals in ensuring this? Munsul, you can start.
Well, thank you, Nikolai. I think I don't feel like I need to emphasize more, because our situation is actually a living example. And let me just give you a short background. In 1963, Frederick Bass came to Sudan as a UNESCO professor and taught at the University of Khartoum for 2 years. He got interested, and then he brought a Norwegian student, Professor Gunnar Holland, who is emeritus professor in Bergen. And then Gunnar Holland brought Sorbo, and Sorbo brought Leif Mangar. And then the collaboration started. From my department in Khartoum, 9 were trained in Bergen, including myself. And that was a driving force for earlier programs with the Savannah project, with NUFU and all of that, until we came to the NORHED and NORHED 2. So because these people are interested, they're engaged, they try to because they saw the benefits that are coming from this kind of partnerships. Now, my worry is that, but perhaps other African countries are exceptions, but for Sudan, I see, at least in anthropology, there are fewer and fewer Norwegian students who are coming to the country to do fieldwork. And I feel a bit worried. And if I look at the department in Bergen, there are not too many Africanists there, Norwegian researchers. So we need to do something, and about this front. And I think this is something that puts responsibility on us from the South, not only our Norwegian colleagues, because this is something that is beneficial for all of us together, and we need to push to make sure that this continues.
Björn Tore, you had a comment as well, please.
Well, thank you, Nikolai. Just commenting on your questions concerning the individual. Of course, the individuals are extremely important, but I don't think we should reduce this to a question of what individuals do in concrete projects only. This is very important, of course, but I think there's a role for institutions, systems, and things like that, in order to strengthen the capacity to establish and uphold equitable partnerships. I think we can do a lot in terms of guidance, awareness, practical ideas how to do this, because I would assume that in many cases the unequal power relations and the results, the negative results that you get out of this, is not necessarily a question of ill will, but maybe a lack of awareness of how to do this, how to be aware, what questions should I be aware of. And I think there's an important role for both institutions and funders in that area. And I think also to stress not only, as I said, the individual research projects, but also see how institutions work together. Me coming from Research Council, as an example, I see that a lot of the research policy, the research agendas, the research and innovation discourse that goes on without the equal participation from Global South partners, which means that a lot of the standards that are set, what are important research questions, what is good research, where do you publish, what is a good researcher, is set on the conditions from the Global North rather than as a joint discussion between Global South and Global North. I mentioned one example when we prepared this meeting on the question of open access, which is a hot debate in Norway and other European countries now, which I think all in all is a step forward, because it will open up access to both research and data and things like that, also for Global South researchers and institutions that have not, for financials or other reason, been able to access this important research. So overall, I think it's a good thing, but also we should be aware that this raises questions and difficulties for Global South institutions that we not necessarily see when we discuss this only among Global North institutions and researchers. It's the question then who will pay for the publications. If it's the individual researchers, would researchers then from the Global South afford to publish in recognized journals? And then of course the question, what is recognized journals, and how do you ensure that? How do we ensure that also researchers in more resource challenging settings are able to access infrastructure and participate on an equal footing? So I think individuals are important, but systems are important as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bjørn Tore. We now have 3 comments left, and we have 4 minutes left. So, I have Solbjørg, then Anne, then Roy. And if you are able to respond within 4 minutes, 3 minutes, I will be very happy. But please.
Okay. Yeah, I just also want to say that yes, I think also system can do a little bit, but I think definitely individuals is highly important in this type of partnerships, and I think that what we have seen today and heard is that this partnerships in NORHED now is built on long-term relationship, and that's what creates trust. And I think trust is essential for mutual equitable partnerships. I just want to say that, and in that sense, I also want to mention that there is this program called the NORPart. Monsol, you were addressing the absence of Norwegian students. This NORPart program, which is managed by DIKU, which is also financed by NORAD, finance actually mobility both ways of students. So I want to just encourage all of you to look into that, because that's where you can actually get mobility both ways. Yeah.
Thank you. Anna, please.
Yes, I appreciate that NORHED 2 is building on experiences from earlier years, and in many ways is a better framework for equitable cooperation. But it's one change that I am a bit worried about, and that is that the leadership, formal leadership, rests with the Norwegian institutions. I think this is a setback for us. We were able to build an institution in the South who had the capacity actually to take the leadership in all regards. Of course, this institution and by Professor Julie Stewart, who undertook this, suffered by not sufficient economic resources to employ enough people and resources to undertake this mammoth task. But I think that the diversity of the projects and what is required in terms of support for leadership and economic resources, the program could have been a bit more nuanced in that regard. It's now a one-size-fits-all, and I'm not very comfortable with now being back like I was 20 years ago as a leader. I've been working for 20 years, you know, to build leadership. and to work against dependency, and so this is a bit of a paradox, I think. And I think also in terms of equitable cooperation, it would have been good to have a little space for joint PhDs from North-South or some joint master dissertations, because if you're going to recruit people in the North, you know, to participate in this, there needs to be continuity on the other side as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We did that a little bit reversed with you proposing the critique and Solbjørg replying to that beforehand. But anyways, we have one more comment from Roy, and then we'll have to end this session. Please, Roy.
First of all, I agree with Anne. The South partner, the agreement partner in the former project, they did a magnificent job. They have access to accountants and auditors, and they have more accountants than we have, and they can do things cheaper and more effectively. So they did a magnificent job. We could not have done such a job like they did. So I agree with that. The second thing I wanted to say is that thank you for organizing this. This is an important topic, and we need to learn much more about it. There should actually be a forum, a place where we can learn from each other. We are now embarking on a long project together with a lot of different projects. And how many are we involved in these projects all together? Must be hundreds of people. There should be a place where we could exchange ideas and learn from each other. So hopefully NORHED can help us organize that.
We will.
Thank you.
We will.
Yes, great. Thank you
Already
so much.
planned.
Okay, great. We've I have to be strict now, and we have to end this. So because we've reached the end, and I just want to thank the panelists really, and also the audience for taking time to discuss this important issue. Thank you very much, and we'll continue the dialogue in other forums.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.